I am Dr. Sumit Pava, co-founder and CEO of Complinity. Welcome to the Masterclass on Anti-Bribery Laws with a focus on FCPA, POCA and UK Bribery Act. I am, just as a self-introduction, I'm a corporate lawyer, company secretary and an MBA with 25 plus years of experience in legal and compliance domains. Currently, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Complinity, which is India's leading compliance software, helping companies comply with the laws of India. Completely, just as an introduction, covers more than 2,500 laws and a checklist of over 37,000 compliances updated on a daily basis. And Completely is adding value to 1,000 plus companies in India and across 13,000 plus users spread across 75 plus industries, from organizations like Panasonic, Max Hospital, Oberoi Hotels, Toyota, Yes Bank, British Council, Hindware, Amaron's Battery, and many more. Thank you for joining. Many of our clients I can see today also have joined, and professional network. So thank you all. And it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker of the day, Mr. Sachin Kulkarni. Hi, Sachin. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. So as an introduction, Mr. Sachin Kulkarni is a seasoned legal professional with 23 years of experience. After spending his initial years as a litigator, he joined corporate in-house roles. He has worked for reputed US and European MNCs such as Medtronic, Alcon, Danaher, and supported the business of companies in Switzerland, Middle East, Africa, and ASEAN countries. Sachin has a strong experience of establishing and running anti-bribery programs for various countries and has actively contributed in complex investigations. FCPA is a subject close to his heart, and we hope to gain some practical insight from Sachin today. So good to have you, Sachin. Thanks for your time today. And we all really look forward to your real practical experience on FCPA and all the investigations that you may have handled or other experience running the compliance programs, etc., etc. So welcome to the webinar once again.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction and this opportunity to interact with all of you here. Let me start sharing my presentation.
Yeah, so I'll introduce the topic once, and Sachin, then you can start. So as an introduction, friends, as we all know, FCPA is a US law that prohibits companies and individuals from bribing foreign government officials to obtain or retain business. This was enacted, it's an old law, enacted in 1977. It applies to US companies, citizens, and their subsidiaries or associate anywhere in the world. Now, you may wonder that if it is a US law, why we are discussing this in India. It also has ramifications for US subsidiaries in India and other companies, which Sachin, of course, will elaborate the applicability and the eligibility who have businesses with the US companies. On similar lines, the UK Bribery Act 2010 was enacted to prevent bribery and corruption in the UK, and it's considered to be one of the toughest anti-bribery laws. In India, the Indian counterpart is POCA, or Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. It's a legislation aimed at preventing and punishing corruption in government agencies, public officials, and those involved in corrupt practices. There was also a POCA Amendment Act 2018, 6 years back, which introduced offences such as bribery of foreign officials, corporate liability for corruption, protection for whistleblowers, etc. So all these laws combined intend to promote ethical business practices, prevent corruption, and combat financial crimes. So that's the theme of the day: anti-bribery laws, where we'll learn about FCPA, differences between FCPA, POCA, UK Bribery Act, some case studies which Sachin would share, opportunities for professionals in terms of practice areas, opportunities for professionals on the GC, on the in-house front, in-house counsels and general counsels who are already doing or who intend to do or take on roles in such companies, and impact on various stakeholders, Q&A, etc. Now, just before we again start, I would love to do an opening poll here. Give me a second. Yeah. So if you could just identify, do you have experience in FCPA or other anti-bribery matters, either as part of advising clients or in whichever company you're working or in the past companies, etc.? Yes or no? That will give an indication to the speaker of the nature of the audience. and which function do you represent in terms of HR admin, finance, legal compliance, IT, business management, or others. So this will help the speaker identify the audience and therefore tailor his presentation according to the interest of the audience. And also, while you are filling this, let me also say that there's a Q&A box below. I'm sure now everybody is accustomed to host of Zoom and Google Meet webinars, etc. So there's a Q&A box. Please keep putting in your questions anytime during the webinar, wherever you have a question. We will take questions in the middle, in some, after covering some ground, and also towards the end. We will try to cover as many questions as we can. So please rapid fire your questions over here in the Q&A box. And Sachin will try to answer as many as he can. Yeah. So last 10 seconds before we close the poll and start the presentation. Okay, last 3 seconds. Please fill up quickly. Okay, here we end the poll. And I'll share the results also with everyone. So 43% say yes, you have some experience in anti-bribery laws, and 57% say no. So Sachin, you can take both the audience into account. It's a good split. And the majority is legal and compliance professionals. You can see 76%. Yes, there are some from finance, HR admin, business management also. Right? So this gives you a complexion of the audience. All over to you, Sachin. The entire stage is yours. Please share your presentation and look forward to a great presentation. Sachin.
Thank you for the poll. Thank you for also giving a good background. Is my slide now visible?
Yes.
Is it in presentation mode? Am I audible?
It's visible. You're clearly audible, loud and clear. Look forward.
Okay. Thank you. So technically, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and it's a pleasure to get into this interesting topic, which is actually close to my heart. As Sumit said, I would only say that whenever we have conversation on this topic, the best way to learn is to learn with our collective understanding. So I'm not bringing a position here that I'm here to teach as the best expert. I think I'm sharing my experience and perspective, and through your questions and comments, the whole group is going to learn and probably improve our collective understanding of the subject. So let's get started. A short disclaimer that we will share some information from public media about some organizations. Again, purpose here is to share that information as is, to draw some awareness. The speakers, myself and Sumit, does not hold any conclusions or do not have any opinion on the liability, culpability, or factual aspects of those pieces of information. It is merely for awareness purpose. This is a quick synopsis. We'll talk about some case studies followed by an introduction of this law. We will try to break down the provisions into anti-bribery provisions and books and records provisions. We'll talk about the two regulatory authorities that implement these provisions. Then we'll come to Indian business, how this law applies to us, where are the touch points to Indian MNCs, companies who are collaborating with the US companies, as well as the subsidiaries of US and European MNCs. We'll talk about how to mitigate the risk through internal compliance program and walk through some elements of a solid compliance program. How should it look like? We'll also talk about how typically an FCPA investigation will pan out, a very high level overview, and where as legal professionals and compliance professionals we all can contribute. We'll go through a summary of comparison of these two laws, as Sumit said, with UK Bribery Act and with the Prevention of Corruption Act. We'll try to conclude our learning through a short summary of do's and don'ts. And as we said, we will try to make it as interactive as technology permits. We will have Q&As in the middle, and we'll also have Q&As in the end. So please start punching your questions as and when you have, not just questions, also your comments, agreements, disagreements. A healthy conversation is welcome. We'll get started with some stories. As we talk about this subject, it makes sense to go through some stories. So you all know Cognizant, right? I'm showing you a news item, that Cognizant, corporation, the US listed corporation, has agreed to pay 25 million US dollars. Why? They agreed to pay this to settle the charges that they had, that it violated the US FCPA, where two of the company's former executives, their CEO and their global general counsel, their chief legal officer, they were alleged to have facilitated payments of millions of dollars of bribe to an Indian government official, right? This was alleged, and you can see here that the names of their global president and legal officer is there in the news item. The allegation was that they facilitated millions of dollars of bribe to an Indian government official in Chennai. Between Chennai and Pune, they were going to construct several lakh square feet of office premises, for which they needed some permits, and it looks like a bribe was paid as an allegation there. They settled these charges by paying this $25 million as a penalty, and this is a news item in 2019. Now you may be wondering, this seems to be dated. Why you are showing us here? First reason is this has happened in Chennai, this has happened in India, and a transaction of alleged transaction of bribery has dragged in such senior executives that they had to lose their jobs. Fast forward August 2024. This is the news. Again, this is in Mint. This is in public media. Mr. Subramaniam, who is the chairperson of L&T, one of the most reputed infrastructure company in India, he has been summoned to depose before the US investigation authorities to ascertain whether there was any role of L&T in the alleged issue, where they said that certain purchase orders were utilized to create some funds, and whether any facilitation was assisted from the side of L&T. Again, there is no conclusion. Now, the reason Mr. Subramaniam is now called, because back then when this issue happened, he was the head of the construction business of L&T, and now he's the chairperson. Indian government and US government has certain treaties under which they are trying to secure the presence, and this news has come. Now, in all probability, L&T did their right thing and supported the construction project, but as a part of investigation, now this is a pain point for such a senior executive to go and depose before the authority. This is a news item, right? This is first story. All of us know Cadbury, right? Now this is the second story that has come in Economic Times. Again, in January 2017, again, Securities and Exchange Commission, the US stock market regulator, which is one of the regulatory body under the law, they have charged Mondelez with poor internal controls, and Mondelez agreed to pay 13 million US dollars, approximately 90 crore rupees, without admitting or denying the charges, right? That, as mentioned here. And the charges were what? Charges were that they paid a consultant who was suspected to have bribed the government officials and possibly some state level politicians for what? For obtaining licenses and approvals for a chocolate factory in Baddi in Himachal Pradesh, right? Again, what happened there was the allegation was, set up, against them. Investigation might have taken place. At one point, they decided that they would like to resolve this investigation by paying a penalty without admitting or denying the liability, right? Again, this is a possibility under FCPA. This is not a possibility under Prevention of Corruption Act. But the reason I'm showing this is, again, this has happened in India. Mondelez has Indian subsidiaries. They have executives working in India, and a lot of people got impacted as a result of this investigation. This came widely in public media. You can see the Economic Times news item. This is the second example. And then, again, you can see here, this news item continues. There is a civil penalty that was, that they have agreed to pay. And allegations were about, alleged bribery for setting up a chocolate factory. Stryker is a reputed spine and orthopedic company, reputed US company. And again, this has come in public media that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, they have charged Stryker for violating books and records provisions of FCPA. And basically, Stryker agreed to settle the charges and pay a 7.8 million US dollar penalty. Again, SEC's order found that Stryker's internal accounting controls were poor. And in number of countries, including India, China, Kuwait, uh, they failed to maintain complete and accurate books and records of all the financial transactions that they were doing. Again, you can go through more details of this news item through a public media, where this was the second time Stryker was investigated in their history, and second time it was alleged that they had poor controls. Again, Stryker went ahead and settled, and I know that uh, Stryker made significant investments in improving their compliance program, significant investments in compliance resources. They have gone ahead country by country to train their third parties associates, and they have improved their control environment to make sure that they are able to gain their reputation, the reputation that they have for their strong products. They also have for doing the business in a clean way. Now, all these examples will show you how FCPA can have an impact on India, right? It can have an impact on various stakeholders in India, and it can create significant reputational risk, financial risk, business continuity risk, and customers will have a question mark whether they would like to be associated with this product or not. Consumers will have a question mark whether they are buying the right product, whether there's the right quality. It can raise a number of questions, right? Now, with that background, let's just go through a quick introduction of this law. This is a 1977 law which actually was enacted and implemented, but not with a full force till the dawn of this century. But since 2001 government started enforcing it very, very stringently. They invested hundreds of prosecutors. They did deep studies of transactions of so many US listed companies, and then they started enforcing this this law very stringently. This law governs the business of corporations and MSCs for the transactions outside US. So the law is titled as Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It is not titled as US Corrupt Practices Act, right? So by nature, it is designed to prevent the bribery in the course of businesses done by the US companies outside the US. So for a business in India, it's a foreign business for a US corporation. And while doing that business, this law intends to prevent any risk of bribery. And that's how the law is designed. Now, this law applies to US companies, the listed companies, unlisted companies, but it applies to their subsidiaries in India, the private limited companies for whom the US or other group companies may be shareholders, as well as their employees, directors who are employed in India, their distributors, third-party consultants, any third-party intermediaries, advisors who are basically representing this US company and their brand in any of the outside US territory, including India. So if you generally see the expansion of jurisdiction is quite wide, and a lot of people who are either working for the US companies in India or serving as distributors, consultants, service providers, they automatically come under the umbrella of application of this law. So there are two important provisions and there are two important authorities, right? And I will take you in the coming slides about in details. So Department of Justice is the department responsible to enforce certain provisions in this law, and then Securities and Exchange Commission is another body, and I will walk you through more details. There are two major provisions of this law that impact us that we are going to go through. First set of provisions is called as anti-bribery provisions, and second set of provisions is books and records provisions. So let's move on one by one. DOJ, as they popularly call, they implement the anti-bribery provisions. There are a host of provisions which I have tried to break down in simple rules for all of you. Basically, it is a crime for persons and companies who are subject to US jurisdictions, right? And when I say US jurisdictions, I mean as I said in the previous slide, the employees, directors, distributors, service providers of Indian subsidiaries of the US companies, not just the global corporation executives sitting in the US. It is a crime for all of them to either pay or promise either cash or anything of value, directly or indirectly, to a foreign government official. So for a US company, an Indian government official is a foreign government official. For what? For obtaining or retaining a business or directing a business to a third party. Now, this might look like simple 4 or 5 bullet points, but if you go through the details, which we will, it has vast interpretation, it has vast expansion. And the way the language of the law is designed is deliberately kept it vague, confusing, and all pervasive, so that any creative uh, design or transaction of bribery can also then, be investigated under it. So again, as I said, application to so many stakeholders, I won't repeat this. This is how the provisions are, and we'll go through the elements of these prohibited payments. Right now, let's go one by one. Anything of value. Now, the name of the bribe is not a cash or a gift or a discount or a free product. The name of the bribe here is anything of value. And anything of value, as you can see here, has wide interpretations depending on the industry you are playing. Right, in healthcare industry, it can be a sponsorship to healthcare professionals if there is a quid pro quo. In other industries, there can be charitable contributions, political donations, foreign trips to government officials, entertainment expenses. People can do whatever, right? Gold coins, complex, electronic gadgets, so on and so forth. So anything of value is purposely designed to be the name of the way improper payments could be made, and that's how you can see it can be interpreted. Now, use of third party is an important element here. A lot of people may think that if I am a senior employee in charge of operations of a particular Indian subsidiary of a US company, and I know that when I joined the company, I undertook FCPA training, I know I cannot give bribe, I have the training, I have internal program. So what I'll do is I'll appoint this distributor who's a smaller businessman who may not be so much organized and who may be representing other Indian and US companies. And then I will invoice products to him. I will invoice him at a low price so that he has enough profit margin between his purchase price and sell price. Sometimes I'll give him free product, and with that I'll create enough cash in his books. And then when my customers ask for bribe, I'll ask him verbally by making a phone call. I'm smart. I will not create an email, right? And say, go and take care of the customers, right? Now, because it is a request coming from a senior executive in India, distributors might sometimes oblige. And this is where I would like to caution, we have representatives from Indian companies and US companies in this forum. This is where it is important to understand that the distributors and third-party intermediaries, it could be channel partners, consultants, service providers, contractors, and so on. When we sign a service contract with the principal company, we sign it with the principal company and not with an individual, right? And company would always secure their interest by making sure that the terms and conditions are not only clearly laid down, there is a clear mention of anti-bribery policy, and the service provider has agreed and accepted that anti-bribery policy. Means there is a promise to do business without bribery. And then on the top of that, someone agrees to say, okay, I will oblige you because you have appointed me as a distributor, because if I am able to do so much of business, and I'll quote unquote please the customer, by using the cash that I have, that kind of risk will create liability for both the parties. It will create liabilities for the third parties who are actually allegedly engaged in the transaction, but at the same time, there is no escape for the principal company because of either ignoring that my channel partner is getting into an improper payment, by avoiding any direct risk by saying, look, my compound is clear. The garbage is not in my compound, but the garbage is in my distributor's compound. I would like to say here that this analogy doesn't work, that my premises is clear and I don't know what is happening in my distributor's books. There is a liability for the distributors, channel partners, third-party intermediaries' actions back to the principal company. It doesn't matter, they know or they should have known. And they know or they should have known is a clear language used by the regulator, because there is a duty that the principal company should be alert enough to make sure that the third parties do not engage into this action of bribery. So use of third party may be a way to facilitate reach and expansion in a vast market like India, where company cannot set up offices, so you have to use distributors. but this is not a mechanism to do those acts which company is prohibited to do. The rules of the games clearly apply to the principal company as well as the distributors. And here there is no excuse that I don't know what my distributor did, or I am not directly engaged, but my distributor may have done something, so please excuse me. That's not an acceptable excuse. So use of third party is an important element. Now there are two exceptions here. Facilitation payments is for doing the routine government actions. Now, this is a concept which is different than the US law, compared to the Indian law, where if a government officer is supposed to do something in the routine course of their business, in order to expedite that, certain amount of facilitation payments is permissible under that law. That exception is clearly laid down in the law. Now, there is a requirement that this officer should be asked to do whatever that officer is supposed to do in the routine course of law, right? For example, if an officer is supposed to award a tender based on certain specifications and prices and etc., and in the normal course, if that officer would award the tender to party A, because party B has given them some money, if he gives the tender to party B, then that cannot qualify as what the officer is supposed to do in the routine course of business, right? But what I would normally do in a 15 days time or 1 month's time, I got a request to do this in 1 week, and it is exactly the same act and exactly the same process followed, then there is no, it doesn't qualify as a bribery under this law, and those kind of facilitation payments are permissible. It is a different concept that we may not have heard, but that concept exists in FCPA, provided there is a clear reasonable details of the payments mentioned, amount is reasonable, and there are accurate narrations of those transactions found in the books of companies, so that it creates a confidence in the minds of regulators and auditors that this payment is really a facilitation payment. So it is very cautious approach that a lot of companies take. Although it is written in the books of law, it may not be, it may not be directly in practice in many companies. The second exception in practice, I would say, is de minimis payments. Again, it is not written in the language of the law, but typically regulators tolerate, smaller amounts, smaller value of gifts and hospitality expenses if they are minor, if they are customary, if they are given in the normal course to many customers. And this can qualify like the brand reminders. Sometimes people can give diary on the occasion of New Year's. A lot of companies nowadays are staying away from brand reminders and gifts also. Gifts are strictly controlled, but going by the language of the law, de minimis payments such as gifts and hospitality expenses are generally tolerated if there is no corrupt intent. Again, the concept of quid pro quo is very clearly coming here again. If the payments are made in the normal course, not because you are my customer and I want to make you happy, I want to give this as a reward of the past business or inducement for the future business, so so customer, please take it. If that is the intent, then there is a clear connection between the gift or the hospitality expenses and the business. But if there is no connection, if this is given to hundreds of customers, this is normally given everywhere, this is customary, the amounts are smaller, and it is clearly written in the books, then it might be tolerated. Now, both these last points, the facilitation payments and these de minimis gifts are, it requires prior review from relevant functions such as finance, legal compliance, and any other relevant functions to make sure that the type of gift item is acceptable, the financial value is capped, the gift is reasonable, it is customary, and most importantly, there is no quid pro quo or there is no corrupt intent. So a lot of companies have gift policy which lays down the types of gifts and the value of gifts. The list is not exhaustive but illustrative, and it is expected that before giving such gifts, a certain approval has to be taken. And then when you give those gifts in your books, you're supposed to call it as a gift and clearly narrate why this gift is given. If these two controls are followed, then some companies have taken liberty to use these provisions that are listed here. Now, these are the important elements of,
Welcome to Complinity Technologies. Complinity is India's leading governance, risk and compliance software helping companies to manage their compliance, contracts, litigation, legal updates, inter-financial controls and more. Complinity is a one-stop shop for all GRC needs. With our proprietary 12 GRC modules and real-time legal updates on 2,000 plus laws and 24,000 plus compliances, all in an integrated platform that is easy to use with automated alerts and risk management capabilities, is why compliance managers, general counsels and chief financial officers choose Complinity every time. Join the most innovative and prestigious brands that use Complinity. Automating your compliance management. Request a demo at complinity.com.
Anti-bribery provisions. Let me take a break here and ask so far if there are questions. Am I going too fast? Is this fine? Any feedback?
Yeah, Sachin, to start with, yes, there are a few questions, and I think, no, you're going good. I think you're reasonably paced. So I think few questions I'll pose to you, Sachin, and you could answer that. So first one was from Ashish. What action was taken on the government officials? So since in the case study you said, some government, there were bribery, etc., Mondelez and stuff. So was there any action taken against the government officials in your knowledge?
I think I saw some references in one of the news item about potentially some action under Indian law, but I will have to go back and search. I do not have the details. The reason being, I will show this point at the end of the presentation that there is a gap in the way FCPA is designed versus how the Indian law is designed. Indian law prohibits both the giver and receiver of the bribe and makes it an offense, and there is a punishment provided for both. US FCPA focuses on the giver of the bribe, but recently government actually enacted in the US in December 2023 a law called FEPA, for an Extortion Prohibition Act. I have a slide at the end of it, and that law is designed to prosecute the seeker or the receiver of the bribe. But under FCPA, there is no action. In the specific example, whether there was an action under Indian law, I will have to go back and search. I'm sorry, I don't have answer at my fingertips.
Sure. Okay. That just out of curiosity, that leads me to one question, Sachin. That if a US subsidiary in India is covered under FCPA and some bribery action happens in India, will POCA also apply in India to that extent?
POCA may apply if the enforcement is instituted. If someone makes a complaint, police receives an FIR or a complaint, and then investigation machinery is set into action, then it will apply.
POCA may also.
Typically, the reason why US Department of Justice or Securities and Exchange Commission make it public the information about the instances of penalties, etc., despite that these penalties are paid without admitting or denying the liabilities, so that if the action has happened in a particular country, then the local enforcement authorities can then take note of it and decide if there is a scope to take a suo motu cognizance and initiate. So depending on how big is the action, whether it is known to the regulators in India, depending on all those factors. In some examples, cases have happened. In some examples, cases have not happened in India.
Right. And okay, next question is, are joint venture companies covered? A couple of people have asked that. Joint venture companies. So since you said subsidiaries, so if it's a 50-50 joint venture or in any other proportion for that matter, suppose there's a only 20% shareholding by the US company of an Indian company, will those kind of companies be covered?
I think so, because ultimately, to the extent of those shares, the legal entity represents the US business, right? And normally, US company and Indian company will collaborate through a joint venture or other arrangement, because they want to use the US products or technologies to be utilized for business in India in whatever form, right? So ultimately, fully or partially, the US products, US brand or US technology is being sold to the customers in India. And in the course of those transactions, if improper payments happen, then that's what US government wants to prevent.
So it is not just subsidiaries, but even joint venture companies and associate companies also will be.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take the analogy that even a distributor who may not necessarily be a shareholder in the US company. It is an independent principal to principal relationship. If a distributor, consultant, contractor, or service provider is brought under the purview of this law, then why not a joint shareholder?
Right. Now, on the facilitation payments, there are many questions on facilitation payments. I'll try to club some of the themes and ask you questions, Sachin, that in India, especially in the Indian context, with, of course, no offense to India, we're all Indians, the speed money, those kind of minor facilitation payments have been very, very prevalent from times immemorial. And things like import of goods, things like some licenses, registrations, approvals, etc., from several government departments do involve certain times facilitation payments. Otherwise, either those things do not happen or they take a lot of time, which can lead to a lot of financial implications or other business implications. Now,
Right.
if it's a very, very important, critical, say a registration or a license, say, or a clearance of a shipment, and where the payment could have been 5,000, 10,000, or or of the likes, but the amount involved would be few crores. So, so is there any criteria? I saw, this is a learning for me, that facilitation payments are allowed, or but with no threshold. So, are there any threshold for facilitation payments? Isn't it a loophole? If there are no thresholds defined, then is 10,000 appropriate, 1 lakh appropriate, 10 lakhs appropriate? How will materiality be decided? And is this practical? Means without the facilitation payments, can you really do business in India? These are some of the 2-3 themes I just combined.
Well, not surprised with this question. I would like to say, if you historically look at a lot of government processes, all of us will appreciate that since last 10 to 15, 20 years, there has been so much of improvement in so many government processes to eliminate the bribery. So if you look at customs, right? So when I'm importing a product, I'm supposed to get my valuation done from Special Valuation Board, and I'm supposed to self-declare the value of my goods and pay the customs duty, right? And get it cleared, right? If it gets stuck, then I get an official communication. And when the customs officer know that this company is bringing all the right information, they will resolve that issue. If I take registration of products with various regulatory authorities, for example, medical devices or pharma drugs, there is a Sugam portal which government has created, where the registration for import and sell of the products in India earlier was on a paper basis, where a drug inspector would review my profile, my dossier. Now it is all done automatically. There is a turnaround time. In a lot of various the different authorities, there is a deadline put on the regulator by government by saying that within X number of days, if a license is not issued, but application is submitted, then it is deemed to have been issued. So there is so much of technological element that is coming in to reduce the human interface, to significantly reduce the risks of corruption. That's number one factor. Secondly, facilitation payment may be acceptable under US FCPA, but we are all working in India, and there is no such element under Prevention of Corruption Act. So even 10 rupee of a facilitation payment that may be acceptable under FCPA, it might still qualify as a bribe under Prevention of Corruption Act in India, because again, there is no concept of facilitation payment under Indian law. So strictly speaking, going by the rule of the law, it is not acceptable in India. Secondly, a lot of US companies, I've worked with 2 or 3 different US companies, and we have gone ahead, in several instances, right from getting a Shop and Establishment Act, inspector visiting my warehouse or my distributor's warehouse and saying, hey, I found some issue in your label, and if you pay so much of amount, and we have said, sir, please go ahead and issue show cause notice. According to me, my label is clear, but if there is an issue, I will review it, and then I will follow the provisions. And sometimes they threatened us to seal our warehouse, and we have gone to High Court and said we have made necessary representations, grant us protection. So if companies take a hard stand that I will do business only in the right way, nowadays it is very difficult. It is very difficult from both the sides. It is very difficult for government officers who are now very clear about their own reputations, and so much of tightening of the system. It is very difficult for government officials. There are so many good government officials. At the same time, not just US companies, but Indian companies have global presence. They are collaborating in several countries, doing international businesses. A lot of people care for their reputation. So it is a push and pull from both the sides. On one hand, technology is making it easy for things to move faster, and the instances of giving improper payment are significantly reducing. On the other hand, it is not acceptable under Indian law. So my advice, straight advice, is just avoid it. Go ahead by the rule book of the law. If things get stuck, make a representation to the regulator, pursue, provide them whatever information they need, and then once they understand that you are a right intended company, then they will go ahead and clear whatever is stuck.
Understand. All right, that's good information. Just on a lighter note, as you mentioned shop and establishment, you also mentioned technological advancements. Everything is coming online. Things are more transparent. Just want to share 10 seconds on a personal experience. Personal means, of course, professional experience, handled personally. We applied for a shop and establishment license for one of our clients, and we, of course, the mandate was that it has to be completely above board. No facilitation payments or speed money is required, and it was an online application filed in the relevant state. And can you believe that the application, which was supposed to be approved within 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, was not approved for 2 months, 3 months altogether, because there was no visit made to the department, no sort of liaison done with the department. And it was so surprising that even in the online mode in certain departments, nothing happened. And then when the client lost patience and he said, I'm not getting it. So we said, yeah, this is how you advised us, and this is what we've been doing. The day the liaison was made, we got the shop and establishment the next day. So, this is sometimes a sad state of affairs, even in online, where unfortunately there is no monitoring that when the officer is supposed to approve the application, that approval discretion, if nobody is monitoring it, even the online doesn't help, without the offline liaison. So, that's a sad state sometimes.
No, I don't want to completely disassociate myself and sitting in an ivory tower and make a statement. This is not possible. But if I was there, I would have sent an official representation and reminder. And if I was the legal counsel of that company, I would have asked the management to hold on for a few more days and tried an official route. So it really boils down to the patience level and ethical decision making of the company and the management to say, okay, am I willing to wait for a few more days and do the right thing? If they decide to do that, it normally doesn't take that much time as we used to see in the past.
On the other hand, there have also been great examples, as you were rightly saying, US MNCs, stamp duty adjudication, these are common matters held because of lack of supervision of the revenue department, applications lying pending for months and years altogether, not just months, years and years, and they're just not getting adjudicated. And there's enough and more patience and tolerance in the company saying, let us, we have filed, we have done our job. If they are not adjudicating, that's their problem. If he receives anything in writing, we will go ahead with it, and that's about it. That was a stand, and then of course then they received the adjudication orders despite after several years. So these are also some stands taken by companies. Yeah. All right. So Sachin, in the interest of time, please go ahead. You can finish your presentation. There are more questions as well. Many more are trickling in, but we have to finish it as well. So you finish your part, and then we'll do a rapid fire of the questions towards the end of the session.
Sure. So moving on, we'll now come to books and records provisions. This is another important set of provisions. These provisions are, implemented by another regulator called SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, which is basically the stock market regulator, which governs the listed companies and their transactions. It is similar to SEBI, but I would say much more evolved, stronger and empowered regulator. And SEBI is moving in that direction, I must say. It has wide powers to audit books of companies listed in the US and take punitive actions. Again, under books and records, there are two important sets of provisions, which are, if you go by the language of the law, applicable to the issuers of securities, which means the listed companies, but by interpretation, their Indian subsidiaries will also come, into the purview. Two important provisions to maintain accurate and truthful books of accounts and to put in place a strong internal controls that should result in prevention of bribery. Now, again, we will go through the details one by one. The accounting rules, the first set of rules basically say that, the US companies or subsidiaries are supposed to have, proper books of accounts, depending on which accounting system that they follow, but it has to have a proper and clear books of accounts where every single transaction must be properly narrated. And every transaction that happens, there has to be a detailed narration of that transaction, reasonable details. So it could be a free of charge product, it could be a heavy discount, it could be a traveling expenses, it could be some hospitality, it could be sponsorship, it could be a charitable donation, whatever, right? There has to be a clear narration of that, and it is expected that company should call a spade. Company should not disguise expense A in the name of expense B, because it might look more acceptable in the eyes of auditors. They are expected to have clear narration of all the all the transactions that are there. And the second important provision is internal controls, which basically require that there should be enough internal accounting controls that should result in two outcomes. First, that these controls should provide reasonable assurance to an auditor, investigator, or a regulator that whatever the code of conduct and internal policies and procedures that are put in place by the company to to examine and monitor and administer all the expenses and financial transactions, there is a clear control mechanism of prior approval, recording, supporting evidence, etc. That reasonable assurance must be provided to the auditors. That much of credibility the books of accounts must build, the internal control system must build. And secondly, the books of accounts must be accurate. And I will repeat, when I say the accurate, in theory, if they give a bribe, they should call it as a bribe. If they give a free product, they should call it as a free product. They should not disguise A as B. And how this will help? This will help because, as I said, sometimes historically in the past, some companies had demonstrated this tendency that I want to keep my compound clean and I would like to put the garbage in my distributors or third parties compound, and creation of slush funds or cash in the books of a third party who's representing the company in the market, that is done, and then that cash is then utilized to make improper payment. So this cash is sometimes generated by asking the contractor, distributor, third party, or service provider to issue fake bills of travels, purchase orders, work orders. Companies sometimes give heavy discounts so that there is enough profit margin. Sometimes the expenses are recorded in the wrong way. Sometimes there are not sufficient supporting documents, and somehow this results in creation of cash. Now, when a company gives a free of charge product, which is not meant for free of charge, but you sell it and then you make money and use that money. When company gives a heavy discount, which is not in the course of normal discount policy, when company approves a fake travel bill, then at a company level, the internal control is not working properly. And then there is a job of respective stakeholders within the company to make sure that internal control is working properly. Because if it works properly, then it would avoid the risk of creation of slush funds or creation of cash in the books of third parties. And if it is not created, then obviously misuse of that cash, the question of that improper transaction does not arise. And therefore, the internal control is supposed to make sure that it prevents the risk of bribery. And these are the two important accounting provisions that you can see. Again, I would like to show you a quick summary here. Again, outside US from 2018 till 2022, you can see this, how many actions were taken and what amount of penalty has been secured by the regulators in the US and other countries. The first row here is DOJ and SEC total, which shows right from starting from 1.3 billion to going up to 2.7 billion in 2020, which is peak pandemic. Then in 2021 it slightly reduced. In 2022 it again picked up. So only in the US billions of dollars of penalties has been received. And outside US, in other countries, in Asia, in Latin America, in Middle East, the local country regulators of that country has also collaborated with US FCPA. And I would like to say this is an increased phenomenon. We see that there is a collaboration between the anti-corruption regulators of various countries, in US, Europe, US, India, US, Brazil, US, China. And then they work together in a collaborative manner, because then they can share information, because an act of bribery is not only an offense under FCPA, it is also an offense under respect to country laws. So if they are able to get enough evidence and prosecute the acts of bribery, the companies and individuals, it will create enough awareness and it will prevent future instances. So there is so much of collaboration, result of which even non-US regulators in the respective company have also recovered significant penalties. And at the end, you can see resolving authorities. You can see Brazil, France, US, Hong Kong, Singapore, UK. So it's not only the US which is implementing the FCPA. While you started it, a lot of different countries have caught up. A lot of different countries have brought in their own anti-corruption law, and there is a collaboration. So there is a dual investigation that company has to go through, and sometimes companies and executives have to go through prosecution in two different jurisdictions. So they are making it very difficult to do a business with improper payments, and the signal is to do business with right intent in a clean way. Moving on, how do we bring it to India, right? How does it impact to companies in India? And here I am clearly addressing two stakeholders which are also represented in the audience today. There are representatives of the US MNCs or European MNCs, and then there are legal compliance professionals, helping Indian companies who have now expanding a lot and working with so many international jurisdictions. So there is a direct impact, as I said, the subsidiaries of the Indian companies, their employees, directors, they are directly impacted and prosecuted because a regulator wants to understand who was that individual at the heart of, creating this conspiracy and, implementing this, illegal scheme, and who was this individual at a lower or a higher level who then made sure that no one talks about it and it keep going and improper payments keep getting made. So there is clearly an individual liability to the senior leaders or whoever is involved in the transactions. There is an indirect impact which I already spoke about. A lot of us are working as service providers, contractors, advisors, distributors, third-party intermediaries, turnkey contractors, for executing the business services for a lot of US clients. And when we do this, people sign anti-bribery declarations, and this is a pitfall because people sign declarations with companies and then they come under the pressure of individuals. The contract is never with an individual. He may be an MD of the company in India, he may be a vice president in Asia, but ultimately, if the instruction that you are getting from a US company executive, and this is a specific advice to the the folks from Indian companies, that please go back to the contract and say, what does the contract say? I always give this tip to salespeople when I do these trainings, that sometimes when they get a phone call or a pressure on phone call from a senior executive to get into an act of bribery or ask the distributor to get into an act of bribery, and that phone call comes, the simple thing that you have to do to save your own job is to say, sir, please write me an email. And that senior executive is smart enough that he or she will not create a challenge for his or her job by writing that email. And if the pressure becomes too much, then you go ahead and write an email saying that today we had a call in which you were instructing me to do so and so. According to my understanding, this is not according to the code of conduct of the company. Can you please clarify what do you want me to do? The moment you write this email, you are serving two purposes. You are saving your own job because you are recording that you are not part of it. And secondly, you're making the whole system alert that you cannot be pressurized by people, right? So likewise, when this kind of pressure comes from the US folks, representative of the US companies, my advice to Indian company, people would be to record it to say that this is not according to the terms of the contract. Can you please clarify in more details what do you want us to do in writing? And then they will get the message. Normally, US company representatives are very careful, but you never. Sometimes people may have pressures and and temptations, and sometimes these things can happen. So when you sign anti-bribery declarations, you are expected to understand the consequences, and you are expected to have that internal controls. Now there is a gap. There is a lot of paper compliance that you see around. A lot of Indian companies and US companies, they collaborate, they work together, they sign contracts, they have anti-bribery policy. But beyond their own systems, many Indian subsidiaries of US companies have not been historically going, now that it's changing a lot, but have not been going to the distributors, third parties, and helping them with the tools to say, what is the right way of bookkeeping? What is the right way of maintaining your internal controls? What is the right way to have proper supporting evidence? What is the right way to have proper narration of all the expenses? What is the right way to make sure that if there is an audit of a distributor by the principal company, that you are able to generate enough confidence that you are not only following the principles and provisions of the Anti-Bribery Declaration or FCPA on paper, but you are following it in spirit. So training of the distributor staff, maintaining internal controls, all these gaps need to be bridged, where more efforts are warranted on the part of Indian subsidiaries of the US MNCs while they are dealing with their third parties in India, so that the understanding evolves, tools are shared, and systems are created, because both the parties are, as I said, in the same boat. Rules of the game equally apply for both. So it is imperative that both parties understand what is the right way to have the right system and prevent the risk of bribery. So that gap is getting gradually bridged. A lot of companies are nowadays getting into monitoring of the distributors, training of the distributors, helping them understand. So therefore, this paper compliance in absence of absence of inconsistent practices in real life doesn't make sense. It can create reputational risk, and therefore US prosecutors are very keen. I'm told that there is a list of 50 executives from various companies that US regulators have, that they are looking at prosecuting them, in their personal capacity, in the criminal prosecution, because it is believed or it is alleged that those executives were at the heart of thrashing a scheme of bribery and implementing it, and they were pushing the system to ignore the risk and keep quiet about it. So US prosecutors are very keen to know who are those individuals. Therefore, it is important to be a little bit selfish and save our own job, and then make sure that the reputation of our company is saved, make sure that the risk of millions of dollars of penalty is avoided, make sure that business continuity is ensured, and make sure that our trust with our customers shouldn't question, am I supposed to use the product of this company who's doing business in a corrupt way, right? So protect that equity that we have with the customers as well. Quickly moving on, how do we mitigate the risk, right? In March 2023, US Department of Justice issued a guidance, and they said that their guidance was to the US prosecutors to say that if a company that they are prosecuting for FCPA has a certain elements in their compliance program, then they should consider that to the credit of those companies, and they should treat them with a bit more considerate view. They may allow them to do their internal investigation. They may allow them to negotiate the penalty. They may give them due consideration for the efforts and investment that company has taken. And therefore, it is important that it has become almost an essential requirement for all the US MNCs to have a global anti-bribery compliance program. Now, this compliance program is not one-page document. It is not one paper. It is a host of various initiatives, and that initiatives must be based on certain elements that I'm going to walk you through. I'm aware of the time, so I'll probably move a bit fast, and hence please make note of your questions. So your compliance program has to be based on the risks such as, what are my products, right? Who are my customers? What is the bribery risk? Because typically a bribery risk for a healthcare company when they are selling products in hospitals or laboratories will be different than bribery risk of a chemical company whose customer set is different, versus a bribery risk of a telecom company or a heavy industrial company, because the product is different. The way the business is done, is it B2B or B2C? Is it a government business or a private business? Whether the business has certain requirements to offer products on loan, on lease, or there is a buy and sell transaction. Depending on all of that, where are those pain points, temptations, or pressures for our associates and executives to get into a misconduct, right? And where is the risk? So the compliance program has to be designed to make sure that your business risk is plugged and program is actually tailored based on your business risks. Secondly, there has to be proper, not only global code of conduct, clearly stating what instances of bribery are prohibited and what is the responsibility of the senior executives, associates, distributors. There has to be proper internal policies for the implementation of the code of conduct. So when there is a customer expense, when there are heavy discounts, when there are free products, when warranties are extended beyond the standard warranty, when there are any off-the-record transaction is being sought to be made by distributor or any associate or company, when there is a risk of side commitments, all these things, there has to be a proper internal policy and procedure that beyond a certain threshold, a certain type of transaction must be reviewed, not just by a sales and marketing leader, but maybe by a finance leader, maybe by an operational leader, maybe by a legal compliance leader. And the rationale of that particular transaction has to be properly recorded. and every single such questionable transaction must be reviewed by more eyes than just the eyes which may have an obvious conflict and and temptation to go ahead and do that transaction, which might later be questioned. So that internal policy and procedures must be in place and must be functioning, where every single transaction that can tomorrow come under question must be properly recorded and approved. Third important element is confidential reporting structure and investigation process. So a lot of US companies have this hotline. Some people call this hotline, some people call this speak up line, some people call this as voice your concern. And this line is typically a 1-800 number which is available globally, and people from various countries can make a phone call and make a complaint in the local language. It is a free of charge calling line where an employee or distributor or customer can raise a risk, raise a concern that there is a potential violation of FCPA, there is an act of bribery, or there is any illegal activity that has happened at the hands of company representatives or distributors. Now, when this kind of complaint has come, it typically can be made by identifying the person or can be done anonymously. And there are reputed US and global companies who manage the hotline for most of the Fortune 500 companies. And then once the complaint has come to this independent company, then they forward the complaint to the company's chief compliance officer, who will then assign an investigation team, and investigations are done in a impartial way. And this will allow even if senior leaders in particular country, let's say India, are getting into a bribery scheme and they are somehow finding a way to hide it, but a salesperson, a sales rep, or a junior finance person or any other person sees that this is not according to the code of conduct that I have trained, now that person has direct access to make a complaint. And when that complaint comes, investigation will take place. And through these investigations, then company is able to unearth if there is a scam and take an appropriate action. So whether that kind of structure is there is an element of a good compliance program, right? Investigation process is a good compliance program element. Whether the company has a chief compliance officer who does not report to the MD, who does not report to the commercial team, but who reports to the audit committee or the board of directors, because then there is an independent reporting, and that person can then call a spade and stop all the wrong transactions. And that person has to be empowered with sufficient resources. This is also an element. Is there an investigation team where they can do an impartial investigation? And when you find something wrong, are you able to punish the wrongdoer? And then when you are able to punish a wrongdoer, are you able to protect the whistleblower, the person who brought in the complaint, from any retaliation? Because if there is a protection against retaliation, then only people will show courage and come forward and bring wrong elements. And when those wrong elements will come in the surface, company will be able to address it. So clearly spelled out non-retaliation policy and examples of protecting the whistleblowers is also an element of the good compliance program. Now, third-party management, right? When we do business in a vast market like India, we have to work with distributors, third parties, consultant service providers, contractors, right? So when we do that, does your compliance program require you to do a pre-onboarding due diligence? Which means, am I looking at a distributor who has a history of corruption and then avoiding getting into such transaction? Am I looking at examples of questionable transaction by this third party? There are due diligence technologies available where you can check the name of this distributor and the owners to see whether they are politically exposed persons, whether they have been convicted in an offense, and you can run the name of these individuals through the global database search. There are further level of diligences people can take. People can go to the website of the municipal corporation to check the copy of the license. They can check whether the office really exists. So there are different levels of pre-onboarding due diligence of third parties that typically companies would do. And they then train the distributors on the anti-bribery policies. They get the declarations signed, and then they decide to sign a contract and then go ahead with the business. Then it doesn't just stop, as I said, doesn't just stop with appointing a distributor or third party, but throughout the life cycle of my contract, am I monitoring, auditing any anti-bribery practices, helping the distributor or the third party or my partner to build a good control to prevent the bribery are all elements. And most importantly, am I telling my sales team not to pressurize my distributors, third parties to say, okay, company nahi kar sakti to aap kar do, hum aapko discount de denge. Whether that kind of pressure is there or not, And are you addressing that pressure very clearly with your sales team is another area. M&A is the last, but not the least. When I'm acquiring a company, am I doing a pre-acquisition anti-bribery due diligence? Am I looking at the target that I'm planning to acquire and say, okay, what kind of business model, how much government business they had, are there questionable business models, are there lack of internal controls, are there excessive discounts, are there more payments to third parties, are there any unethical commitments? And if otherwise the product quality and the business model is profitable that I'm going to acquire, then I am also inheriting the risk of bribery. And when that risk is inherited, tomorrow if there is a prosecution or action taken on that company, as an acquirer of that company, I also need to then make provision to deal with that risk. But am I accepting this company as a part of my acquisition with open eyes? And then there are experts who are helping companies with this kind of due diligence. Do I have a solid integration plan where I apply my anti-bribery program to an acquired company? I specifically plug the risks that are identified to a due diligence. Am I doing proper training of the employees and distributors of this new acquired company? Am I trying to make an effort to implement my culture into this new company? Am I giving this clear message to them that if the business was done in a particular way, now that game is no more on. This company wants to do business in a clean way, and they have to follow these processes, and they need to bring to us if they have any risk, right? Am I making those efforts after I acquire the company? Is there enough training and communication? Do I have case study based trainings that is imparted to all my distributors, associates, employees, etc.? Is my program based on real life examples? Am I giving only a theoretical training, or am I giving them a training that they can apply in their day-to-day business, right? Are my commercial leaders acting as speakers in these trainings? Because when the commercial leaders are asking distributors and employees not to pay bribe, then there is a huge impact versus a legal and compliance training, team doing that training. Do I have a system of communication where if I have terminated an employee or distributor for a wrongdoing, on a no-name basis, at least I am communicating the type of transaction that is not acceptable that can result in termination? Am I creating that awareness when I punish a wrongdoer, right? Most importantly, tone at the top. No system and no internal control will work unless and until my leadership is committed to do business in a non-corrupt way. It will not work unless my CEO, my MD is giving that clear message to the distributors, to the employees, that I want you to grow the business, but I want you to grow the business in a clean way. If you find a risky business proposition in a particular customer, then don't go, scout for another customer. There is enough customer and there is enough market, but only do the clean business. Even if sometimes you do not meet your target, I'm okay, but I want you to do business only in a clean way. That kind of messaging has to also go from the leadership. That will result in a strong culture, right? Now,
Sachin, if I may just now request to wrap up in say 5 minutes or so, because there are many more questions that have poured in. We would love to cover the questions as well. And sure, you and I are the only two people standing, between the audience and the lunch. So next 5 minutes, if you could wrap up, then we'll cover questions.
I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. So I wanted to give a clear overview of how investigation process takes place. I'll run it very fast. Typically, the complaint comes through internal hotline or someone, reports to the authorities. If there is an internal complaint, there is a self-reporting, then investigation takes place. If it is an internal complaint, then company can do initial review and go back to regulator and request regulator that allow us to do internal investigation. If that is permitted, then typically a US law firm and US trained qualified lawyers will get involved. They'll collaborate with Indian law firms, internal law, lawyers or compliance professionals. At times, they can also collaborate with big four audit firms, and then investigation will happen. Typically, it is done by US qualified lawyers because they want to protect attorney-client privilege, because ultimately, then they can decide what material they would like to produce, they can produce, etc. Findings of the investigation is then reported. It involves in a lot of different steps, which has, forensic imaging of the laptops, email search, keyword searches, review of accounting statements, interviews of associates. Sometimes there are spot visits, customer visits, and they apply various creative techniques to unearth the risk of bribery and transactions. And then based on that, then company could negotiate. If they have a solid compliance program, company could negotiate the fine. In all cases, DOJ and SEC end up making public statements about a company, as I showed in the earlier examples. But if companies who have a good compliance program, they get a due credit in negotiation of fines and other punitive actions. If their serious intent and their investment in compliance program resources can be seen by the regulator. There are a lot of opportunities for us. People like us can advise in designing a strong compliance program, do annual reviews of those program, create and deliver training material, train the investigator or conduct the investigations ourselves, review the documents, financial statements. As I said, there is forensic imaging, there are issues on privacy, what kind of email can be accessed outside India, what cannot be, and so on. There is a risk of Indian law involved in parallel to the US laws, and then there are implementation of mitigation steps. So there is so much of areas where Indian legal compliance professionals can add value by collaborating in the investigation process. Last two slides, I have probably last three slides. I want to show a quick similarity and difference between FCPA and UK Bribery Act. The similarity is that both the laws, like Indian law, US law also prohibits the giver and taker of the bribe, receiver of the bribe. And in both laws, now there is a corporate liability. Earlier, there was only individual liability under Indian law, but there is an amendment as a result of which now the commercial organization and their leadership, so both the corporate and individual are now made liable. Now, there are some differences between Indian law and UK law. Indian law prohibits bribery only to foreign officials, government officials. FCPA says that, but the UK bribery talks about private commercial bribery also. Under FCPA, there is an element of mens rea, in the sense the intent to obtain the business in a corrupt way has to be there. But under UK law, improper action in itself is a problem. Then there is punishment only for the giving of the bribe. But here again, UK Bribery Act is more like an Indian law. It prohibits giving and receiving both. I'll not go into the details of punishments. You can find information in public domain. But facilitation payment is okay under FCPA. There is no such concept under UK bribery law. Now, coming to comparison between FCPA and Indian law, again, the similarities are it offers it only offers offer of the bribe not followed by an action, because there is a word promise or pay. So even if there is a promise not followed by actual payment, it is actually punished under both the laws. And there is an extraterritorial jurisdiction, because by the nature, the foreign business done in a corrupt way is prohibited, and hence US company can prosecute transaction that happens in India. But under Indian law, there is an extraterritorial jurisdiction. If an Indian citizen gets into an act of bribery outside India, that person can be prosecuted under Indian law. Now, there are differences. FCPA talks about bribery to the foreign officials. It doesn't talk about bribery to private commercial customers. But Indian law has gone ahead and said private commercial bribery is also prohibited. Again, FCPA only punishes the giver of the bribe. Indian law punishes, both the giver and the receiver. Then there is a facilitation payment. As I already said, there is no such concept under Indian law. It is prohibited. Then there is a criminal violation, and then there is a difference in the in the penalty, but there is a clearly separate punishment prescribed for both givers and takers of the bribery in both the cases. Now, there's a new law, as I said, Foreign Extortion Prevention Act, that is brought in the US in December 2023. We have to see how it gets implemented, but the major requirement of this law is that they would like to now go behind the seekers of the bribery, the takers of the bribery. So we have to see how it gets implemented in the course of time. I'm at the end of my presentation. I thought I'll just give a quick summary about the whole topic through quick do's and don'ts. So on the do's side, I would say develop a strong anti-bribery compliance program that I spoke about. Have example-based anti-bribery training for the stakeholders. Build strong internal controls at your level and your distributor level or third-party intermediary level. Have a periodic review of the bribery risk based on your business model, change in your products line and change in your businesses. Have a hotline for anonymous reporting of the violations, and have a proper investigation and no retaliation. Teach your leadership and mid-level managers to spot the risk of bribery and escalate immediately. And most importantly, make sure that your CEO and your senior leadership gives a clear message and sets the right culture for having a non-corrupt business. On the don't side, I would say avoid getting engaged into transactions with principals, that is US MNCs, or if you're representing US companies, then third parties who are known to have reputation of indulging into improper payments. Look closely, do your due diligence and take a decision rather than blindly engaging with them. Don't grant excess discounts, any off the record messages to your distributors and ask them to generate cash in their books to use as bribery. Don't entertain any confusing indicative messages, indirect messages to get into improper payments with customers by using cash discounts, free products, etc. Record everything and ask yourself, is this the right thing to do? Don't offer any off the record benefit to a government or private customers during a tender to say, I will issue a side letter and I will ask you to do something else, etc. Don't give any messages that business targets must be delivered by hook or crook. Make sure people understand that they have to do business only in a clean way. They have to avoid a risk of bribery while doing the business, and don't ignore messages from employees, such as, this is India, you have to do business to meet the competition. यहाँ पे तो सब कुछ चलता है, आपको यहाँ धंधा करना है तो ये करना पड़ेगा. Don't ignore those messages because people who are demonstrating that tendencies can potentially fall prey to the temptation. So you need to make sure you properly train people who are showing those tendencies. With that, I am at the end of my presentation. Back to you, Sumit, for Q&As.
Perfect. Thank you, Sachin, and sorry for rushing you through because I know you have so much to share, and his experience of 23 years and practical experience cannot be sort of summed up in 1 hour. But anyways, you did a great job till now, Sachin, but there is a host of questions waiting for you. So what I'll do is we'll take a 1 minute sort of commercial break in the lighter sense, if I may say so. Sachin, have a glass of water while my team can play a Complinity video for a minute, and then over to the questions, Sachin. Yeah. So team, quickly, if you can, and Sachin, you can unshare the screen. Yeah, and team, if you can play a 1 minute Complinity video.
Welcome to Complinity Technologies. Complinity is India's leading governance, risk and compliance software helping companies to manage their compliance, contracts, litigation, legal updates, inter-financial controls and more. Complinity is a one-stop shop for all GRC needs. With our proprietary 12 GRC modules and real-time legal updates on 2,000 plus laws and 24,000 plus compliances, all in an integrated platform that is easy to use with automated alerts and risk management capabilities, is why compliance managers, general counsels and chief financial officers choose Complinity every time. Join the most innovative and prestigious brands that use Complinity. Automating your compliance management. Request a demo at complinity.com.
Perfect. Thank you. And by the way, this video is slightly old. Now we have 2,500 laws and we have some 37,000 compliances. So it's like India's leading compliance software. Also, Sachin, you've been a client also in the past in your earlier roles as a general counsel of your other companies that you were part of. So would you like to share a minute or so of your experience of implementing the Complinity compliance software as to how did it help your company, or did you see any sort of tangible benefits of implementing compliance software?
Sure. Again, I would like to say a couple of things. First of all, in one of my job, we had several legal entities in India, and we were struggling. Even if it is a private limited company not listed, you have ROC compliances, you have GST compliances, you have industry specific compliances, you have warehouses, customs, and so on. And sometimes there are compliances leading to criminal prosecution and risk to the senior leaders. So my worry was, how do I make sure that the leadership team and management teams of several legal entities get this confidence that things are in control? We were looking for a solution. To be honest, there are solutions with other MNCs, and there are solutions with people like Complinity. I found Complinity solution much more practical because number one, the ease of access to the whole Complinity team is one of their big strength. Secondly, it is a platform put together by lawyers and software professionals. So there is very dynamic development of anything new law that comes every month. The notifications and updates come. Most importantly, software is very user friendly. I'm able to generate various types of reports to show my management every month. What type of compliances are due, what type of compliances are pending, what are delayed. I can color code them. I can do pie charts, and that generates a lot of confidence. Where am I lagging? And this allows me to then cater to the whole India, where I had warehouses, factories, and R&D centers across the country. It allowed me to have site-specific compliances. It also helped me to create a culture of ownership where I was able to, give the ownership of the software reference compliances to different stakeholders. And a lot of people had access to Complinity, and everyone in my organization who used Complinity was very happy with the user friendliness and the responsiveness of the Complinity team. So I am a very happy customer, I would say.
Awesome, awesome, Sachin. Thank you. We take it as a compliment. I, on behalf of the 90+ Complinity team, take it as a compliment, and I'll surely relay your message back to the teams. So just one poll for a minute, then we go to the questions, Q&A. So can you see the poll? If you could.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Would you like to have a demo of Complinity compliance software? Anyone who wants to have a demo, you can just write your option here. My teams will we will have your details, and we will touch base with you offline. If you could quickly indicate. And also, would you like to be a speaker in future Complinity webinars? If you say yes here, again, my teams will reach out to you for your areas of interest or specialization. And we would love to have our audience come back as our panel as well. So while you are filling up this poll, we can simultaneously start the Q&A also. So Sachin, the guidance is we are at 1:25 p.m. With the permission of the audience, if we can go till 10 minutes more till 1:40, so we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A max. We'll surely wrap up by 1:40. But Sachin, you'll have to do a rapid fire. I'll rapid fire questions. Sure. And if you could give one-line answers, 10-second answers, without
we'll try.
If you've seen the Karan Johar show and the other rapid fires on the TV, so I'll be the Karan Johar, but then you have to be that celebrity across. Easy, difficult, small, medium, large, all kind of questions will come. Yes, so here you go. Sachin, so whether any payments are made under duress is also an exception under FCPA?
Yes, if it is made with corrupt intent, yes.
Right. Okay. How to decide reasonable amount for Diwali gifts internal policy? Means what is the threshold, or should be the threshold?
There is no limit provided by law, but I would ask people to use what is called as Times of India test. Imagine the information about your gift is coming on the first page of Times of India. Will it make you uncomfortable?
Wow. Yeah, I've spent 5 years with G Capital, and this is exactly what they used to say. The newspaper test. Whatever you're doing, if that's is in the headlines of the next day newspaper, will you be in a good light or bad light? So that's the deciding criteria. All right. Any examples of POCA? Any cases that you would have come across under POCA other than the FCPA?
We have come across cases with POCA and other regulatory authorities where even the involvement of companies and channel partners during tenders. And we have seen regulators taking strong action against the Indian officials also, not just against the givers of the bribe. So now the whole environment is quite dynamic in that regards. No one wants to take risks with their reputations, neither government officers nor companies.
I understand. And do directors or officers or are they personally liable under FCPA?
They are. I gave you examples that in the Cognizant example, it is public domain that the global CEO and global GC, Global General Counsel, had to resign. I don't want to make a statement why they resigned, but it is in that news item, it is publicly displayed that they were resigned. There are other examples where senior executives were resigned, and I was told that there are examples where people have been prosecuted. Now, the Rajat Gupta case, who is the CEO of Goldman Sachs, is not a FCPA case. It's another type of case, but it's a celebrated Indian American leader who violated the laws and had to go in jail for 2 years.
Yeah. Sheetal asks, this facilitation payments, why it is there in the Act? Means it's quite strange. Of course, we can't fathom it in the Indian law, but when there are thresholds not defined, so why should facilitation payments be allowed in the laws for any official to do his official duty?
If you look at it purely from an Indian context, it doesn't make sense. But you have to imagine that this law was enacted in 1977 in the US, and in their cultural context, they thought it might make sense.
I understand. And Swati says, what are the consequences faced by the third party who is involved in giving the bribe? to the giver.
Sorry, say that again.
So the consequences for the bribe giver.
So again, under FCPA, the bribe giver is directly liable, right? So
Sorry. I'll reframe the question. What are the consequences faced by the third party, maybe an intermediary, consultant, or a distributor who is involved in giving the bribe?
if third party is involved, then third party will be prosecuted. We'll have to go through the whole process. I don't know exactly remember the example of third party being directly prosecuted, but I showed you the example. Again, I would like to make it clear. There is no conclusion about liability of L&T, but the chairperson of L&T is being summoned in the US. That itself is a pain for such a senior executive of a reputed company who's supposed to, look at the customers and grow the business rather than go and depose in the witness box.
Understand. Vijay says, does POCA cover private companies as well?
Yes.
Okay.
It covers private companies on both the sides, givers and takers.
Understand. Kosa Raju says, in these cases of Mondelez, etc., while the foreign company was proceeded against in that country due to non-sharing of information and investigation reports, no action has been taken on the actual recipients of the amount of bribe in India. So it's more like a comment. You have anything to say on that?
No, I have not gone into the details of the recipient side.
Understand. Pawan says, up to what amount the government officials are allowed to accept gifts of hospitality?
So typically government officials have their own internal protocol, whether they are allowed or not. Companies should have their own protocol. As I said, it should meet the test of reasonableness. It should not be so high that the government official should feel obliged, right? If it is reasonable, if it is low value, if it is done across the board, if it is properly recorded and it doesn't cause you embarrassment if it comes on the first page of Times of India. These are some of the criteria you should consider.
Understand. Anurag asks, does the company need to have an in-house facility for hotline, or can it be outsourced?
There are most of the US companies go to a company called Navex Global. Navex Global is responsible for managing hotline of most of the Fortune 500 companies, and that they have their own reputation. If you ask me, I would always recommend to go with a third party, because then there cannot be an allegation that there was a complaint against the CEO or CFO and the company itself put it under the carpet. If it goes to a third party, then third party under no obligation to hide it. They will directly disseminate information, and in case inquired, then one can. So it creates a credibility if you give it to a reputed third party.
Understand. And also, just to mention, since this question has been asked, our sister law firm called eMinds Legal, which is a corporate law firm in India with around 60 people. We are also managing a couple of hotlines for some MNC clients, where people can email in a email box, or there are some hotline, there are numbers created, virtual numbers, which can transport to a particular official. A lawyer will attend that and transport it back to the company, etc. So if you are interested, you can reach out to the Complinity team and they'll connect you to eMinds Legal. All right. Subhadeep says, can we get the PPT? Subhadeep, you follow all our channels, you will get PPT in different forms, in terms of podcasts on Spotify, or videos on YouTube, or some blogs on LinkedIn, and many more resources you will get. Please subscribe to all the channels. My team can again put it in the chat box for easy reference. Okay. Subhadeep again says, does attorney-client privilege work for in-house counsels in India? That's not an FCPA question, but still.
It is a debatable question. Some lawyers in India believe that it applies in India. Some lawyers believe it doesn't apply. But in the context of FCPA investigations, most of the US companies prefer to engage a US law firm and bring a US qualified lawyer who is member of one of the US state bars, so that then they can certainly administer attorney-client privilege. In India, there are arguments on both sides.
Done. Mangesh Karande, if the vendor pays a bribe to government official for their client work and client is unknown to this bribe paid, is the client in problem under these acts? Means he's saying the intermediary is paying, but client either is not aware, or maybe he says that he's not aware. Is still the principal still liable?
See, the underlying principle is the principal company is responsible for the acts of their distributors, third parties, or intermediaries. Doesn't matter they know or they should have known, right? So the duty is cast on them to make sure that they know. So ignorance is not an excuse, unless they are able to really produce significant evidence that I have a program, I have helped this vendor with a tool, etc. So there are a lot of ifs and buts, but the bottom line is the prevention is an expectation.
Right. Shanu says, while accepting a contract or declaration of FCPA, how much level of negotiation is acceptable? Being a third party, in some cases, one cannot have full access to internal accounts to their clients.
Yeah, so see, we have come across this situation when we were doing distributors of audit of distributors, and distributors would typically say that my purchase register and my my sell register combines products of 3 or 4 different companies. So so typically US companies would insist that anti-bribery policy is not negotiable because it's a global policy. You can seek guidance in terms of how to maintain accounts in such a way that I'm able to give access to your company accounts by protecting confidentiality of other company accounts. And there are ways to do that in SAP and other systems.
Right. And the question, I think that's already been answered, applicability of to the Indian law, so to the Indian company. So if I'll only sort of go ahead, I'm educated good enough for the last 90 minutes now, that yes, if the subsidiary or any associate company in India, which is a subsidiary or associate of a US company, or even if you're an intermediary or a consultant and acting on behalf of a US company in India, then FCPA very much applies to you. And as Sachin said, not just FCPA, Prevention of Corruption Act, which is the Indian counterpart of FCPA, which is also equally or more strict because it covers both the bribe receiver and the bribe giver. That will also apply. So you may be charged under 2 laws: FCPA by the DOJ, Department of Justice in the US, or SEC, and POCA by the Indian authorities as well. So that's one. And a couple of examples or stories, 1 or 2 stories I would love to share with you very quickly before we wrap up the webinar today. One is when I was general counsel in my last job 10-12 years back in a UK MNC. There was a sweet box gifted to me along with this. It was also gifted to the CEO and the COO by the landlord. We were a tenant in a large commercial complex, and a sweet box came just as a goodwill gesture on Diwali. Maybe the value would have been 500-700 rupees only. There were questions on whether we can accept it, whether we cannot accept it. There were mails written to the compliance lead in the UK that this is, explaining them that, okay, Diwali is a festival of lights in India. It's customary for people to give sweet boxes. If we deny it, it will tantamount to rudeness. Can we accept it? And then the CEO, by the way, of course, we got the approval, but the CEO said that, okay, accept it on my behalf, but distribute it in my team. So he was saying, okay, you can take it, but I don't want to touch it. Just distribute it in my team.
Don't take it to your home.
Yeah. So and also I've seen some of the clients where we ourselves have offered diaries, as you also took a diary example, diaries or pens, the value of which could not be more than 100-200 rupees probably. They very clearly said, no, not even diaries. We'll err on the side of caution. It's completely not allowed as per company policies. And I was wondering, not even a 500 rupees threshold, because for these things, but some companies take it to the T. They take it in letter and in spirit, saying this is just not allowed in our policies, and we will really comply with it in letter and spirit. And one more, example, it's interesting for me to share. When we onboarded a US client, you will not believe they took our banking details from us, and it was incidentally Axis Bank in Gurgaon. They took the relationship manager details also, and our relationship manager got a call straight from the US where the client was asking that whether do you see any suspicious activities in the bank accounts of us, like as a service provider. Imagine that's the first time I heard, my RM calling me saying some US client of yours is calling me asking that whether can he see some suspicious transactions in bank accounts. So he was confused, how to respond, what to say. Of course, everything was clean, but these kind of onboarding due diligence, you may call it, where it's not just documentation submitted by the service provider to the client, but clients calling the bank directly. I don't know how much banks are authorized to share this on calls or emails. That's another question. But those are some of the examples, Sachin. I also wanted to share with you my interface with some of these things. Yeah.
I was also a couple of times bombarded with chocolates, and once it came as an artifact, and it was very difficult to courier back the artifact. So we found a creative way to handle it. We said we are going to put it on auction. Whichever employee wants to buy it, the proceeds will go to charity.
Wow.
We did that.
That's a wonderful thing. So, accept bribe. Even if you accept not bribe, but even if you accept some gifts, don't take it home. Auction it out.
Never.
So, yeah.
Never.
All right. No, and another on a lighter note, Sachin, for example, if you receive a gift and you cannot take it home, you can of course courier it back to me, and because I didn't receive it from the ultimate giver, and you can gift it to me. I don't mind taking it, right? But of course, it has to be within the thresholds. You don't bribe me at all. Okay, so that's on a lighter note. Thank you, Sachin, very much for taking time out, and I'm saying this with the heart that it was genuinely a good masterclass. I would say not just a high-level webinar. The slides were great. The explanation was great. I know you could have done 30 minutes more, but of course we have to respect time also. And I think we could do justice to a lot of Q&As, posted by the audience, and the audience did turn up in great numbers. So thank you, audience, for coming and also patiently waiting for 1 hour 40 minutes on this great webinar. The recordings will be available on all the channels. Please follow us on the channels. And whoever is volunteered to be the speaker, there are quite a few names which have come. Thank you for that. We'll reach out to you. And people who have indicated their interest for Complinity will reach out to you as well. And thank you, Sachin, for all the good words for Complinity and overall for implementing compliance software. So
thank you so much. I would only say in the passing that any one of my colleagues that are here on the call, this subject is very close to my heart. If you need any help, if you would like to just discuss a particular situation or get some advice, I'm willing to do it pro bono. I'm willing to help whoever wants that help. If anyone can benefit from my experience, happy to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sachin, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Complinity team.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Welcome to Complinity Technologies. Complinity is India's leading governance, risk and compliance software helping companies to manage their compliance, contracts, litigation, legal updates, inter-financial controls and more. Complinity is a one-stop shop for all GRC needs. With our proprietary 12 GRC modules and real-time legal updates on 2,000+ laws and 24,000+ compliances, all in an integrated platform that is easy to use with automated alerts and risk management capabilities, is why compliance managers, general counsels and chief financial officers choose Complinity every time. Join the most innovative and prestigious brands that use Complinity. Automating your compliance management. Request a demo at complinity.com.